Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things where I'll tell people like, hey, if you're really serious about exploring your own consciousness, um, you have to set aside that, 15 minutes or 20 minutes a day, let's say 10 to 30-minute window a day. And you have to meditate every single day, once a
Yeah.
day. You have to make it routine, and so that way, even if you are converting 1 out of 7 meditations into consciously aware out of body,
That's
that's
good.
still that's still one a week.
That's good ratio.
And so what is then in a year? Well, then a year goes by, all of a sudden you've gone out of your body like 50 times,
Right. Yeah.
and so then you start to learn how to maneuver away from the physical body, go down the hallways of your house, go through the doors, go through the ceiling. You learn how to use your energy body, because at first, even when you do get out into your energy body, it's not really that easy to maneuver it. Some people are lucky. Some people are kind of just really natural at this stuff, and they just do it. And but I think there's a difference between the spontaneous activity and then just being consciously aware during the spontaneous activity. It's almost like there's some kind of naturalistic movement, and things just kind of happen more just easily. But when I started to intentionally try to go out of body, that first few months, that first year, that first 2 years, that's where I had maybe a little more difficulty with um, kind of ungluing that energy body and really
Right.
getting it out of the physical body, and also learning how to like fly and do all those kind of things. There's something different about self-initiating the process, and how you are like forcefully integrating your consciousness into that body forcefully through intentionally. So there was kind of like a little phase there where I was kind of like almost relearning how to maneuver those energy bodies, but then once I did it enough, then I was fine. um um there People, at first I always thought there was just one body that we were having these astral projections in. And then as I had more and more experiences, and started to observe, the actually look at my energy body features,
Hmm.
hands, arms, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
It took a little while. It took me a few years, but then what really mind boggled me was when I started to notice how I would um, project into different type of bodies.
That was one of my
Um,
questions.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's something that's where you know your consciousness kind of just like explodes,
Right.
because you're like, what is this madness? what why what is going on here?
Well,
Why
if you,
is
and that's why if you're on your own and you don't really have any knowledge or experience, or have heard from people who experienced it, because that's that's where I relied on, um the books, the people that were writing about it and were pioneers in it too. And that's how what helped me tremendously, and that's me. Okay, that helped me tremendously to figure out what to expect, to understand what to expect, and what the different levels were all about, and how I could maneuver through the different levels. And so that helped me tremendously, so I wasn't learning everything on my own.
Yeah, you've mentioned, I think in the last conversation we had, you've mentioned how you've projected straight through a lot of different levels and gotten more into like the mental planes. Was that
Um,
what we were talking about?
I'm not sure if I, I I don't know the different planes where I'm at. I just know haven't mapped them out. I just
Um,
know the environment, the difference in the environments,
interactions, right?
interactions, the
Yeah,
environments,
yeah,
how I feel, um, what, the atmosphere, the people, if there's any people there, the
yeah,
how it sounds,
yeah.
that type of thing.
The
I could
current,
tell the difference in the
I,
frequencies.
I call that, like, when you say sounds, uh, in my own mind, I call that like it's almost like a current, like a
Hmm.
sound current.
Yes.
And it's like, when you are just out in Mother Nature here in this Earth reality,
Hmm.
and you're just listening to the wind, right? And the animals, and the how the wind moves through, like, the branches and the pine needles, and just all the different sounds that this Earth reality makes. It's
Yeah.
almost like these different frequencies, different planes of have like their own sound current that just naturally emanates from whatever that structure is,
Hmm.
with that
Hmm.
plane.
Right.
And I found that, when you do go up higher and higher in the astral structure,
Hmm.
like, for me, it's kind of like a really, like, intense, but at the same time, like, mellow, kind of flute like sound. And it's just kind of like traveling through the air.
Yes.
And
It travels through you, and I notice that when I get into the higher planes, I'm singing. I'm just
oh,
automatically singing.
oh,
It's
wow.
yeah.
It's just like emanating out of you, huh?
Hmm.
You're like not even trying to sing,
I'm
right?
not even trying to sing. I'm
Yeah.
singing, and I hear or I hear someone singing either with me or to me. Yeah.
Wow.
And yes. And everything's around me is singing.
Yeah. It's vibrant. Yeah. Have you ever, when you're in these more, higher up, frequencies, have you ever, just looked at, like, plants and stuff,
Oh yeah.
and, like, like any, grassy area, or like a prairie, or yeah.
They're alive. I mean, they're alive here too, but I mean, you could
Yeah.
see their life. You could see them, and they're also emanating. They're singing. I've been where
Yes.
they sing.
They're making their own sound, yeah.
Yeah, and when I fly through, I've flown through many forests with the
Mhm.
trees and the and I just and I want to touch the leaves, and I could spend hours just looking at and playing with the leaves of the
Mm,
trees. Yeah. And the
interesting.
flowers, the colors are not, what we can't even imagine here.
Yeah, the colors, I remember, when I was, like, 4 years old, um, so, um, I'm not sure if I was, completely mind wiped. I've always felt that it's almost like they tried to mind wipe me, or they did, but it didn't really work well or something. There was some kind of error, if it was my own doing of manipulating something to not get completely mind wiped, or if it just didn't work out in general. I don't really know. But
You mean when you were born in this realm? When you were born?
well, for me, I have a lot of memories, from before being in this body.
Okay.
Um, and most of those memories are just essentially memories of where I was with my consciousness before this life experience. I don't remember, like, way back, like a bunch of different life cycles. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about more or less just more recent life cycles previous to this one. Nothing too crazy, nothing too complicated, but most of those, past life memories are centered just in, just the one previous to this one. And I remember, I was traveling back and forth a lot. So I was born. My physical body was born, in 1980, uh, and in the first about roughly the first 4 years of my childhood, every probably I guess every nap, every sleep, every time, every day I went to bed, I was projecting back to the astral plane,
Mm.
and I was going back and forth. And then it came to a point where I was in my the astral house that I was in. I was living in a very like futuristic, like high tech, futuristic, high rise kind of metro area. The house I had in this big tall building had really tall ceilings, really huge windows. Um, the sky was a really bright golden color. And that's when a being came to me. I can remember it right now. I mean, it's such a pristine memory, with a contract piece of paper, and the being started to go over this piece of paper and whatever this was. I've come to learn that it was most likely some kind of soul contract, as I've gotten older and learned about soul contracts.
Mhm.
And I can't remember exactly. I remember looking at that paper, I remember reading it. But for the life of me, though, I just can't remember exactly what the words were. I just remember looking at it. But when I was done looking at it, this being said, it's time for you to fully go into your human body. You can't keep going back and forth and astral projecting back and forth. You have to let go of this astral, this place you're in currently, and you have to go on down to the train station, and you have to wait for the train that goes to Los Angeles, and you have to permanently go into your human body. I was upset. I was angry. I didn't want to. Um, but I did know that there was a really great mom and dad, there with, with my my little kid body.
Mhm.
So I went to the train station. The train station was the roof of the train station was like a golden color. The sky, the rays coming, just the light coming through the air, hitting against the train, and the roof of the train station again, golden color. I got on the train, and the train went down into through a huge portal, and that porthole went into Los Angeles. And I exited the train, and then I roamed around in the etheric plane for maybe a good couple few days. I roamed. I didn't go to where the house was, to where my parents were and my body was, but I roamed around the outer perimeters of the city, just hanging out. There's this huge refinery that's in the harbor of Los Angeles, and I remember spending just maybe what would be the equivalent to a whole day or something, and I was just hanging around there, just still hesitant to go into full kind of like integration mode into my human body.
Wow.
And then it came to that point where I felt like I had to go back, and so I knew exactly where the house was. I knew exactly where my kid body was, and I remember then just making that decision to finally integrate into my body. And I remember distinctly when like the day after that happened. Um, um, I had a lot of paranormal activity for a while, from like age 4 to 8. My senses were heightened, and a lot of I would see spirits and
Mhm.
shadow people and angels and demons and all kinds of things just randomly, for that age 4 to 8 range. And then the spontaneous out of bodies then started. 8, 9, 10. And then also around 10, the lucid dreaming kind of kicked on also. And in my lucid dreaming, what was funny too is another reason why I say lucid dreaming is different than out of bodies is because as a teenager, you can imagine a lot of teenage boys have, a lot of sexual curiosities, right? So I learned very quickly that when I was in a lucid dream, I can act out my
Mhm.
sexual energy or my sexual desires, and uh, there was no consequence.
There's yeah, no
Um,
entanglements.
yes, exactly. It's just that just in your mind. It's just in your it's a simulation of the subconscious mind. Uh, and but then I also learned, yeah. So when I acted out those desires when I was out of body, it wasn't the same thing. And so that's why the distinction, between those different forms of
Right.
astral projection, because lucid dreaming is astral projection, just a different form of it. How there was differences in those,
Yeah.
as you said earlier, the environments, and how your encounters function with other beings.
Yeah.
Um,
I find also in the higher planes that there's not I'm usually by myself or with maybe one or two beings that but it's not but in the lower planes there's lots of people around.
yes, yes,
It's
correct.
very crowded.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. It is. It is. A
Yeah.
lot of people who've reincarnated here into this Earth reality matrix, and into these human avatars. A good majority of them in their last life cycle were in the low astral planes, low to mid astral planes. I found, just from venturing around, how it's not really in the low astral, but somewhere above the low astral structure, there's a lot of these centers, like
Hmm.
recovery centers.
Hmm.
They're not quite like hospitals, but they're more like recovery kind of places. And it's almost like people go into recovery to help get over their traumas,
Hmm.
from their previous life experiences, or it could have been a really bad drug addiction, or maybe they were just a horrible person and they hurt a lot of people, but then had a kind of a spiritual awakening process after doing so much harm to others, and then needed their own recovery, from their own actions. But so there's a lot of different scenarios, that can happen. I think that there's dozens and dozens of different types of things that people go through before they enter into this human experience, and dozens of different scenarios and things that can happen to different individuals when their human body dies and they move into the etheric plane, or directly into the astral planes or recovery centers, or they get, from my own experiences, I've learned that there are beings that are in the astral structure, that um, want to try to take your energy and your consciousness. So there's a lot of tricksters, and the only way for them to facilitate um, their astral reality construct is by bringing more and more consciousness and souls into that construct, to feed energetically into that construct to power it up, for a longer period of time, because astral matter is amazing. And as you can manifest things through your thoughts 100 times faster
Right.
than in physicality. And in this place we're in now is this consciousness prison
Mhm.
that we're in, so to speak. But of
Right.
course, there's no point getting too negative.
Yeah.
But there's so many different things that are a possibility and that go on. And that's why, like, on my channel, I try to talk about these different topics, and I talk about soul traps and reincarnation, something I want to get more into on my channel, because it's not that those things are important or affect everybody, but they do pertain to a certain percentage of people. For example, if a person has given their heart and consciousness, let's say, to their LDS faith, they're just a really devout Mormon, for example, then they will bypass most of the stuff in the etheric plane after physical death, and they will bypass soul traps and demonic entities and all these types of things, because they've already made the connection, the entanglement with their energy to what that belief structure is. So they bypass it. I'm not saying everyone does, but for the most part,
Yeah.
they bypass it.
Yeah, William
And
Buhlman writes about that, and Robert Monroe calls them belief system territories.
yes, correct.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah, and
why,
he William Buhlman found his mother in a belief system territory based on her faith as a Christian and a fundamentalist Christian,
yeah,
and he tried to tell her, you can go to
yeah,
higher place,
yep,
and she said, well, this is heaven, this is
yeah.
what we need.
There's many
And it was the
heavens.
same
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, it was the same thing as what she was doing here. It was just things were better.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they were just better than
Mhm.
her her physical experience, and all the things that we do go through here, and but it's mirrored, when people are in these astral worlds, there's a lot of things that they can experience, like eating food, for example,
Mhm.
where you can eat food.
Mhm.
It's just like it's all an illusion, though. you
Right. When I hardly ever eat food in the astral plane. It doesn't even enter my mind.
know
It was different here, but it doesn't even enter my mind. And I'm like, and then just the other day, I I ate or tried to eat these cakes that looked really good. Looked really good, but it wasn't satisfying at all.
Hmm.
It wasn't like and so I guess it depends on where our mind is at with it.
Yeah, exactly. It really
Yeah.
does. And that's why we all come into this stuff at different perspectives.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and it's really interesting. Like a couple of people I know who are good at remote viewing and astral projection. They're just kind of naturally prone to just having them. They've experienced them a lot of times. A couple of, I'm not going to mention their names, um, but for example, a couple of them are really paranoid kind of people. They're
Mm.
real paranoid, not schizophrenic kind of paranoid. Just they just have a paranoid kind of personality, and so they're going out of body, and their paranoias are then also manifesting through the consciousness, because they're
Right.
not realizing how powerful, just how consciousness operates, in
Yeah.
these different places. And of course, consciousness operates differently in the etheric plane as opposed to the astral planes, as opposed to a mental plane, how consciousness operates there. And of course, in mental planes, the beings there, you mentioned how there's less population
Right.
density in different areas.
Right.
These beings, all of them have the ability to read your mind.
Mhm.
So you can't, like, for me, especially when I was younger, just getting to the mental planes and just having any little, like, inkling of a sexual thought
Mhm.
or desire, because as as a human being, um most people, especially when they're younger, they have a lot of sexual energy,
Well,
and
yeah, and sorry to
it's just
interrupt you,
like kind
Jeremy.
of hardwired into your
Plus,
psyche.
as you're moving through these planes, you're going to feel that surge of that surge, that that sexual energy. You're gonna feel that surge as you're moving into certain planes. It just is part of the deal.
But
Yeah,
here's the deal, though. The deal is that most of these beings that I've run into in the mental planes, they're doing their thing. Like you said, like with William Buellman's mom, and
yeah,
she seemed content, right? She liked
right.
where she was and all that kind of stuff. Like these beings are just content and they like where they are. But there's no sex there. And so that so the sex within itself, even though sex can be a positive thing, it still derives from a lower vibrational frequency. And that's one reason why so many people do reincarnate into these lower planes and into these consciousness prisons, because just too many people have these desires and needs, addictions, wants, all these things wrapped up into a big ball. and
Well,
and
in the higher planes, you can still have a merging. You can still have a merging with someone.
but
It's
it's different types of stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's these the connections you make with people. They can fluctuate, correct, just in different varying degrees. um and that's not to say that someone can't have sex there,
Mhm.
but what I'm trying to say is that I think that some of those sexual thoughts or how we approach it is more primal, you
Right.
know
Okay. Yeah.
and it's primal enough to where
Gotcha.
it's kind of pushed away. And so I was usually, whenever I've been to the mental planes, um uh at some point I get pushed down and I drop down into lower structure. Either either I just go back to my body
Mhm.
and I'm just stuck there in my body, I can't move, and
Mhm.
start wiggling my foot and wiggling my fingers, and
Yeah.
and then finally come to.
Integrate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's either that, or sometimes I'll slam into my body, boom, really hard, or I'll just drop down into a void,
Mm.
or I'll drop down into the lower structure of the astrals, or none of that, and I'll just end up like in my room, but out of body, but near my body.
Mhm.
And then I'll either just kind of get pulled back in,
Mhm.
or I'll just start an astral projection over from that point
Right.
and then immediately move through the door. And like that's like an instinctive thing I always have nowadays, where I go from out of body and then through the designated door. I don't go through windows. I don't go through any kind of reflective surface.
I don't go through windows either. Yeah.
I don't go through any water,
Mm.
um, anything like that, because a lot of times it'll just throw me into a whole other place.
Mm.
And